Headlines on that 82% in Florida support for medical marijuana. And despite the ravings of the Polk County Sheriff, Grady Judd, what is that, a Florida sheriff name or what? Grady Judd. It appears more than 4 out of 5 Floridians support making medical marijuana available in the state through a constitutional amendment. Sheriff Judd recently published an op-ed where he said, quote, "This is straight out of the pot legalization playbook from other states. Yet I believe Floridians are smarter than these pot-promoting hucksters think." End quote. Well, I believe Floridians are smarter than Sheriff Judd thinks. I mean, not only do 82% of them support legalizing medical marijuana, but more of them support outright legalization than oppose it. The opposition to medical marijuana is just about less than 1 in 6 people. Only 16% of Floridians oppose medical marijuana use. And this is drastic improvement in medical marijuana support. The last poll that we talked about was the St. Pete poll in August, and that was 73.5% support. Previous poll by People United came out at 70%. So it seems like the more Florida hears about medical marijuana, the more they support it. Now, the Quinnipiac poll that we're talking about, this 82%, is worded slightly differently than the others. Because this one, the Quinnipiac poll, asks about allowing marijuana use for medical purposes with a prescription rather than a recommendation. Now, as you know, Florida's amendment can't mandate prescriptions because just like all the other medical marijuana states, it has to be a recommendation. If you use the word prescription, now you're running afoul of federal DEA prescription monitoring that forbids Schedule I drugs, you know, like peyote and heroin and LSD and cannabis. Now, on the case of outright legalization, it's also gaining some momentum in Florida, with 48% of Floridians in support, 46% opposed. However, the wording of that question may have brought support down compared to the previous St. Pete poll. The Quinnipiac poll asked if Floridians support legally possessing small amounts of marijuana for personal use. The St. Pete poll asked if marijuana should be taxed and regulated like alcohol and made legal for any adult to use. The tax and regulate question got 58.8% support. So that suggests to me that Floridians would prefer a well-regulated recreational marijuana over the idea of simply just allowing recreational marijuana. That is, if the supporters can get this medical marijuana amendment on the ballot. It's the Kathy Jordan Medical Cannabis Act. We've interviewed Kathy on the show. It does seem destined to pass if they can get it on the ballot. But now we turn to the dirty tricks. This is where Florida's State House Republicans and the Florida Attorney General, Pam Bondi, are challenging the summary text of this amendment, this initiative petition, at the Florida Supreme Court. And their claim is that supporters are hiding the ball and deceiving voters as to the amendment's scope. Bondi wrote, quote, "If the amendment passed, Florida law would allow marijuana in limitless situations. Any physician could approve marijuana for seemingly any reason to seemingly any person of any age, including those without any debilitating disease, so long as a physician held the opinion that the drug use would likely outweigh the risks. Florida would be powerless to stop it." End quote. Now, what Bondi is referring to are sections in the amendment that would prevent the arrest of a physician and allow an affirmative defense for a patient if, in the physician's opinion, quote, "the potential benefits of medical cannabis would likely outweigh the health risks for a patient," end quote. So yes, this amendment does have a list of 24 qualifying conditions like AIDS and Hep C and glaucoma and cancer and PTSD and so on, conditions that would get you a card and protect you from arrest. But from my non-lawyer reading of it, it appears that a physician who writes a rec for a non-qualifying condition, like depression, insomnia, or anxiety, couldn't be arrested or punished. And a patient with those conditions who's arrested for possession of or cultivation would have an affirmative defense in court. Now remember that for any other condition was the famous clause in California's Medical Marijuana Act that opened the floodgates to cannabis access for anyone who had a compelling story and $40. So if Attorney General Bondi can convince the Florida Supreme Court that the ballot summary is promising medical marijuana only for debilitating conditions, but the actual amendment would allow for almost any condition, that might trip it up at the Supreme Court, and that overreach could prevent the 82% of Floridians from voting on medical marijuana. Don't get me wrong. I'd like to see that language get on the ballot and pass. I think that would be awesome to have another wide open medical marijuana state. But you're talking about a conservative Supreme Court out there in Florida, a lot of conservative legislators. I sure hope we didn't overreach on this one.
Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina.